Hey everyone, it's Tyler here, manager of the Chicago Metro History Fair, with an introduction video for you to NHDWebCentral, the new website building platform for all website entries to the Chicago Metro History Fair. So if you are a first-time student and you have never done a website before, or you're used to using Weebly and you're using NHDWebCentral for the first time, this workshop is for you. So what we're going to do during this workshop is go through the CMHF website tip sheet. So we've got 4 very important tips on here. We're going to be running through that and also going to be giving some examples of each of these tips and kind of some exercises that you can follow along with as we go to help you build your web page. So go to NHDWebCentral.org, create your account, get logged in, and get ready to follow along. And here we go. So the first tip for any website that you're building using NHDWebCentral is to first do your research, then design your web page, figure out what you want your layout to be like, and then log into NHDWebCentral.org. So don't even do any of this stuff. Don't even jump onto the computer. Don't even log in and create your account and start messing around with the website builder until you are really sure what your topic is, what your thesis is, what your main arguments are going to be, and your main points or claims that are going to lead you up to building up that argument. So figure out what exact pages you want to have on your website. So know in advance, are you going to have a historical context page? Does that need to maybe be 2 pages for a long and a short term, or a local and a regional or a global context or something like that? Make all of those types of decisions before you log into NHDWebCentral. The reason is because there's so much tweaking and adjusting and resizing and reformatting you can do with NHDWebCentral that if you're trying to build content while you make those decisions, you are going to be in there forever. So if you already have kind of a vision, an idea of how you want things to look and how you want to lay out your argument figured out before you log into NHDWebCentral, and you can really just focus on the actual building part once you're in here, it's really going to make your process a lot better. So we really strongly recommend that. That's tip number 1. Before I jump into tip number 2, I'm going to show you an example website that we've put together here. So I'm going to go, this is my references page, let me back up actually. And what I've done is I've made a sample page here about the history of hockey helmets. So something historical, but that I didn't think a student was likely to pick. So sorry if I've stepped on any toes of students who are working with hockey helmets for their topic. So here's an example of my homepage, just an example of kind of what we're going to put together today, working together. And then I'm going to skip and show you one of my other pages about early hockey, the game. And so you can see an example of what a page is going to look like that you can create using some of the tips in this video. So we've got images and text and headings. It's not exactly an award-winningly beautiful website, but it's nice and clean and well laid out and everything like that, so it certainly meets our requirements. And then I do have a references page. This page looks a little, doesn't quite look right, but if you do zoom in, you can see that we actually do have our summary statement and our bibliography here. They're just kind of sized wrong. So we'll work on that together, but that's an example of some of the things you can expect us to go over in this video. So now I'm going to switch windows and go into a brand new site that I've started that has nothing in it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into Edit Site. I'm going to ignore this browser outdated message. I'm not sure what that's about. Every time you log in, you're going to see this new features pop-up window. Do pay attention to this. It's a new platform. They are adding new features all the time. So in particular, the auto nav block is going to be really useful for us, and we're going to work with that in just a few minutes. But for now, we'll X that out. If you haven't already, take a second to make sure you understand and kind of are familiar with our workspace here. So this blank white canvas is going to be where we put our content of our page. We can add and rearrange the pages that make up our website up here. Here's some kind of shortcut toolbar. I don't use those very often except for this blue one, which is the save icon. That's really important. Anytime you do something and it works the way that you wanted it to, click save so that you make sure that those changes are retained and that you don't lose them. And then likewise, anytime you make a change and it doesn't work the way that you want it to, don't press save. Instead, just you can try this undo button. Sometimes that works, but if that doesn't work, just don't save, and just reload your page, and then that's going to get you back to the last time that you saved. So saving whenever things are going well and not saving when they're not going so well is going to really benefit you going forward. Anyway, on to tip number 2. So the reason I was kind of showing you this workspace is because we need to access our blocks up here. So that's our 4 kind of squares. And you can see under tip number 2, we want to put everything into containers. I'll give you an example of why that is in a second, but for now, to get started, we want to scroll down past basic, and you can see there's a structure heading here, and under structure, I want to add a container. Okay, so now I've put that container onto the page, and now I'm going to add things like my images, my text, whatever, into that container. So let me show you how this will work. The first thing I want to do to give you a good example of why this works is I'm just going to find the largest image I can of folks playing some ice hockey. I really am just looking for an oversized image here, so I am not going to be following good practices as far as citing my sources right now, so kind of being a bad example in that way. But for right now, I just want to find a nice large image. Yeah, so this is exactly what I'm looking for. It's basically an image that is too big to fit on the page. I'm going to just save that quickly. Let's make a new folder. Great. So I've just saved that image of this hockey player, and I want to go back to my page where I was editing. Now, let's say I put the image into the container. So here in my blocks, I'm going to find my image, drag that right inside of my container, and release. So it knows that I want an image in there. Now we need to tell it which image we want. So I'm going to double click there, get that fun little noise. I'm going to go to my folder I just created, desktop, hockey, find my image, open that there. It's going to upload. This part is a little weird. Now you just need to click your image once. You should see it load in the background, and then once you do that, you just X out of the dialog. So with this X, there's no save to save the picture that you chose or anything like that. So I'll just hit X. I'm going to save my page, and now I'm going to hit this little eyeball button to preview, and you're going to see this picture is just way too big, right? It's totally running off of the page. So we need to fix that, and the container is going to help us make that change easier. So what I'm going to do is click on my image, and anytime you click on an image, a text box, a heading, whatever, those are called elements or blocks. So anytime you click on one of those elements or blocks, it should automatically, look, I've clicked on the image, and it's opened up here with this little paintbrush, my style sheet. So you can see there's some options that we're going to change here, like dimension and decorations are the two that we're going to use the most often. But anytime I select something, it should automatically open that style sheet. If it doesn't, just click the paintbrush. So now that I've got my image in the container, I'm going to go into the style. And let's take a look. I want to change the sizing and get this thing to fit on the page. So that's dimensions. So let's click dimensions. And we can see here it's got a width and a height that are set to auto. What I'm going to do, this is a really, really important trick, and this is something I recommend anytime the layout isn't working the way that you want it to, is try changing the width of your item. So in this case, I'm changing the width of my image element to 100%. So I've typed in 100%, and I'm just going to hit enter. And now what that did is it tells this image, hey, you can take up 100% of whatever container that you are in. So if we, first of all, let's save and preview and just see how this looks. So this is really nice. Now the image is fitting on the page, but even more than that, if somebody's on like a laptop with a smaller screen, a judge isn't going to be using a phone to access your website, but if they are on a device that does happen to have a little bit of a smaller screen, as the screen changes size, look, the image, here, let me close this one behind it out so you can tell a little bit easier. But basically the image is going to change sizes with it. So as the window gets smaller, so too does the image. So that the image is never cut off. And then if I go back to full screen, the image is going to take up that full space again. Now if you have a smaller image, it's not going to get bigger than its original size. So this trick is really helpful for extra large images. but that's one really good example of why we want to use containers. Let me give you another example of why containers are so helpful. One thing that well, first let me delete this image. So now I'm back to just my page with my container on it. One thing that a lot of pages will use is this idea of side-by-side, elements side-by-side. So back to my demonstration, you can see we've got images on the right, text on the left. That's a really common layout. You'll notice if you try to just take, let's say, text here, and then if I want to put, let's just copy this text, just so it takes up more space. So I'm going to put a couple paragraphs of text here. Now if I want to put the image next to it, your first thought is probably just to drag the image, put it over next to it. But you can see that doesn't quite work. You can only put the image above or below, and this is just kind of part of how the browser and web design works. The browser is really good at understanding things going on top of each other, but it's not as good at understanding things going next to each other. So if I drop that image in, I'll go ahead and use this hockey player again, and I'm going to do the same trick and set my width to 100%. We don't need to worry about the height. It figures out the height automatically and keeps everything proportional. But here, so I've got my text on top and my image below. There's not really a way to get them to go next to each other unless I use another type of container. So back to my blocks up here, I'm going down past basic, and I'm going into structure, and I'm going to use 2 columns here. So just to keep things simple, I'll add my 2 columns below the images that I already put on there. So I'm going to add my 2 columns to the very bottom of the page. You know what, that's did not quite work the way I wanted to. I'm going to actually take my own advice, and I'm going to reload the page because I haven't saved it in a little bit. So I want to kind of wipe out some of the changes that I just made. So yeah, here now I'm back to before I had the text. I'm going to actually just delete my image, start over from just my blank page with the container on it. Okay, let's go back to my blocks. Let's go down, 2 columns, drag my 2 columns in. Now let's try this again. It doesn't call them columns once we add them, it calls them cells. But now that I have 2 cells side by side, I can take my text, put it on the left. Let's add some more text just to fill up some space. And then on the right, I will go into my blocks, drag my image onto the right, click my hockey player. Again, they are way too big, so I'm going to click that image, go into dimension, set my width to 100%. And that pretty much did what we wanted, so I clicked save. I'm going to preview, and you can see now that we have the image and the text side by side looking pretty good. Obviously, one more thing we'd like to correct though is this text seems to be kind of sticking or flexing to the bottom of where the image is. We'd like it to be aligned to the top. So let me show you how to do that quickly. And this is another example of something that you just can't do without a container. So I'm going to click this text. This might take me a couple tries, but all the better for you to learn. So I'm going to click my text element. It goes into my style sheet again. This time I don't actually need the dimensions. What I want to look for is flex at the very bottom. I'm going to look for that vertical align characteristic. So let's see if this does it. I want to vertically align this text to the top of its container. No, that did not do it. So I think what I need to do is, instead of aligning the text itself, it is inside of this cell. So I think I need to click the cell and do kind of the same trick. So I'm going to go under flex, skip all this stuff until I go to the very bottom and see vertical align. Let's try this. Top. There we go. So now it has moved the text up just the way we would expect. I'm going to save and preview again, and that's starting to look pretty good. Obviously we'll need a title and everything like that, but as far as getting the text and the image side by side, we've accomplished that. So that's a great trick with containers. You're really going to have a hard time putting elements side by side and getting them to appear and play nicely with each other without using containers. So that is tip number 2 about using containers on your page. Let's move on to tip number 3. I'm going to close some tabs here. And I like the way this is looking, so I'm going to click Save. Now, I'm on my home page, and I need to create some more pages. So let's go ahead and go into my page manager. Let's create a new page, and let's call it my historical context. It asks for a page name and a page title. The page name is what's going to appear in the address bar. The page title is what is going to appear to users on like their navigation menus and stuff like that. So your page name needs to be all lowercase. It can't have spaces or special characters, but your title can have those things. So I'm going to just name my page context, but give it a title of historical context. I don't want to use one of these templates, and I don't want to duplicate an existing page. I just want to add the page. So now I have two pages, home and context. To get between them, in order for our user to get between them, we need to create a navigation block. So we're going to use, on tip number 3, we're going to use auto nav. So go ahead to your blocks up here. Under basic, it's the very last block under basic. Let me close this. And so if I scroll down, I'm going to see auto nav. You can put this anywhere on your page, but usually it makes the most sense to put it near the top of your page. Usually inside that container is a good move. Let's see if I can get it where I want. I can't quite get it in the container right now, but that's okay, so I'll just kind of drag it. It looks like NHDWebCentral has just given me 5 smart navs, so let me see if I can get rid of some of those. I must have accidentally dragged more than I meant to. This is a good example of where NHDWebCentral is sort of acting strange. I'm not really able to erase these auto navs, so I'm going to not press save. I'm going to reload my page. Let's get rid of my pop-ups. Okay, and we're back before we put the auto nav. So let's try that again. Go down, drag my auto nav. I'm not even going to try and put it in that container this time. I'm just going to put it below my images just for simplicity's sake, and I'm going to drop it right there. So you can see, hopefully you can tell right away what AutoNav, or sometimes it calls it SmartNav, is doing. I've dropped it in and it's automatically created a horizontal navigation block that contains my pages, home and historical context. So I'm going to click Save. Now one really cool thing about the AutoNav block, let's say I want not just a historical context page, but I want to add another page, and I want to call it References. So add that page. Now if you look at my SmartNav, it has automatically picked up that references page, and it knows that because I added a page to my project, it needs to include that on my SmartNav. So I like the way that that works, so I'm going to click Save right now. One really important detail about the SmartNav or AutoNav is you need to add it to every single page, or else your user is not going to be able to get back where they came from. So for example, if I go preview my site right now, I've got this AutoNav down here, and I can use that to go to my historical context page, which is going to be totally blank, and I'll do that, but because it's totally blank, there's no way to get back out. So what I need to do is, let's exit this. If I switch over, save just to be sure, to my historical context page, drop an AutoNav in there, and hit save. Actually, I should follow my own advice, and actually let's go ahead and put that into a container. And save. Now, when we go home and preview, now it's not just a one-way thing. I can go to historical context, my AutoNav is there, and I can get back home. I haven't added it to references yet, but I would want to do that and add the AutoNav to every page so that I can navigate freely between the pages. So AutoNav is really, really helpful. One other nice thing about it is you can rearrange the items on it. So let's say I wanted, for whatever reason, let's say I wanted references before historical context. Probably wouldn't really do that, but if I did, I would double click, sorry, let me slow down. I would double click anywhere on my AutoNav block. It's going to bring up my nav editor, and I can just rearrange the things on there. So let's say I drag references up before historical context, and drop that there. Save, save, and now, very cool, references is before historical context here, but it's also updated on the historical context page. References is before historical context. So anytime you add a page or anytime you rearrange the items on your AutoNav, those changes will apply across every AutoNav block on all of your pages. Now, one thing that won't apply is any styling that you do. So let me select that SmartNav or AutoNav block, and it's going to take me, remember, into my style sheet. I'm going to go down to decorations this time, just to make it a little bit easier to use. I think it's really helpful to give a little bit of color to that AutoNav block, so we'll do kind of this grayish purple color. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, but check it out. It has not saved my changes for this AutoNav block. So don't start changing the font and color and all that of your AutoNav until you're really sure how you want your page to look, because if you change all those fonts and colors and then you decide you want to make a change to your overall theme of your pages, or you want to change color schemes, you're going to have to go back and change that AutoNav block on every single page. So save those kind of cosmetic changes until the end, until you're pretty sure you've got a good idea of what you want those to look like on each individual page. Okay, so that takes us through tip number 3. So we have already talked about putting things in containers, and we've talked about using the AutoNav to create page navigation. Let's go ahead and go down to tip number 4 and use that Embed Multimedia tool to get our summary statement and annotated bibliography on the site. One thing I'm going to need to do really quickly is just get an actual PDF of a summary statement and an annotated bibliography ready to go. So I'm going to go to chicagohistoryfair.org. This is a good example of I should have prepared these before starting this video, and as a student you should make sure that your summary statement and annotated bibliography are done before you try embedding them onto your site. There's no sense embedding them onto your site and then having to make a bunch of changes. You're just going to have to redo that embedding process later. So make sure that you're kind of have your summary statement and bibliography ready to go before you post them onto your site. So basically, I'm just going to go grab one of our previous papers from a previous year of the contest, just because that's a PDF file, just like I want my summary statement and annotated bibliographies to be. So I won't be actually including a summary statement and annotated bibliography, but you can just insert your own files, obviously. So let's see, I've already created a references page. Let's go to that page. Let's follow our best practices that we've already learned about and put a container on this page and put an AutoNav in there. Alright, looking good so far. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do my summary statement and annotated bibliography next to each other side by side, but you can certainly experiment with different layouts. There's no reason why you need to follow that exact layout, but it gets the job done, and so that's what we'll be doing together here. So, following tip number 4 on the tip sheet here, we are basically going to drag a 2-column block into our container here. So now I've got, just like I showed before with the image and the text, I've got one on the left and one on the right. Just to keep from getting confused, I'm going to pop a subtitle into each of those, just so that I don't mix up which one I intend to be my summary statement and which one I want to be my annotated bibliography. Okay, so now I've got 2 columns, and each column has its own subtitle. So below each subtitle now I'm going to go into blocks, and I'll go down to Embed Multimedia here, and I'm going to take one, put that on the left under summary statement, and one on the right under annotated bibliography. You might notice they're already starting to run off of the page, and so we're going to need to go into those dimensions in a little bit and fix those. But first let me actually set the file source itself. So I'll just use the same PDF for both the summary statement and the bibliography block just for the purposes of this demonstration. Whoops. So I'm going to click that, X out, double click here, click the PDF and X out. So far, so good. We've got both PDFs, well, 2 copies of the same PDF. One on the left where it says summary statement, one on the right where it says annotated bibliography, and it's kind of automatically, NHDWebCentral has kind of automatically made both of those scroll for us. So technically we've accomplished our objective. We do have the SS and AB on the website, but I just really don't like the way that it looks right now and the way that the bibliography runs off the page. And then also if we do have like somebody working on a smaller screen, the bibliography can get totally knocked off the page in a way that we need to fix. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let me close some tabs. Alright, so let me select my first embed multimedia item on the left here. I'm going to click that once to select the element. Now, it's gone into my style sheet. I'm going to go into dimensions here because we need to worry about the size. And you can kind of already see our issue. So for whatever reason, NHDWebCentral, when you embed multimedia, it automatically sets the width to 615 pixels and the height to 350 pixels. This is an issue, basically just in general in web design, we want to avoid using absolute pixel values because somebody on a bigger screen that's going to take up less of their screen. Somebody on a smaller screen that's going to take up a bigger percentage of their screen. We want to avoid that and have the image just take up a certain amount of the screen and use those relative sizes. So again here we're going to do the same trick I showed you earlier with the image in the container, and we're going to change the width here to 100 pixels. I'm going to save actually. NHDWebCentral does this sometimes where it starts my text starts inputting backwards, and so usually you can just save or reload and it'll fix that for you. But so I'm still adjusting the width element of this on the left, or the attribute of this element on the left, and I'm going to change that to 100% and click enter. You can see so far that looks like we're actually going the wrong direction, but when I change the one on the right to also 100% and hit enter, you can see that now they split the space nicely. So telling it that telling an element that it has a width of 100% is kind of like a way of telling it you can take up whatever space you are given in your container, but no more. And it makes it play nicely with other things next to it. So by setting each of these to 100%, they sort of communicate with each other and know to split up that space evenly. So anyway, let's just save and see how this is looking right now. So definitely better. The annotated bibliography is not running off of the edge of the page. And if I start to change the window size, we can see the bibliography, it never gets cut off. It does this weird thing where it's not quite lined up right, but it never cuts off the right-hand side of the page. The only thing we need to look out for is if we really cut down on the width, then it stacks the summary statement on top of the annotated bibliography in a way that makes them really hard to read. So a few different things you can do about this. You know, one of the simplest is just to simply, I know I just told you to avoid hard-coded pixel values, but 750 pixels is about the height of one page. So in this case, it's not the worst idea to simply save, preview, and right there we've got a nice summary statement and annotated bibliography side by side. So thank you for watching. Please let us know. Contact us at chicagohistoryfair@gmail.com or at historyfair@chicagohistory.org if you have any other questions or requests for other videos like this about NHDWebCentral, the new website building platform. So stick with it. You can really create some great looking websites and really share your research in a powerful way. So stick with it. Don't get frustrated. You're the first to use this brand new system. So give yourself a pat on the back and hang in there and let us know if we can be of assistance. And we can't wait to see what you create and make history on NHDWebCentral. Thanks for watching. Hey everyone, it's Tyler here, manager of the Chicago Metro History Fair, with an introduction